Southeastern Bow Hunter Podcast.
All right, guys, we got the man from Spokane. I hope I said that right. Mr. MFJJ, mother-loving Josh Jones. If you don't know the name, man, I am honestly shocked. This dude's helped me out a lot learning about, bow tuning, arrow tuning, broadheads, fletchings. I bought multiple things off his website, Podium Archer. I think it's Podium Archer,
Yep.
podiumarcher.com. And he has a YouTube channel called podiumarcher.com. You might have seen him, or no, just Podium Archer. You've probably seen him on that, or you've seen him on Elk Shape. He does a lot of work with Tim Connor and Dan Staten. Dude, I'm rambling now. I'm honestly happy we've been able to get you on here. It's been about a year in the making. So what's
I got a hectic schedule, man.
Yeah, I know. And that's, dude, I remember the first time I messaged you, I never expected a reply. And it was some question about my bow or arrow or something. And I've watched a lot of your videos, and in almost every video, you're like, I'm so busy with this, I've got that, hunting season, helping friends, this. And I was like, he's never going to reply. And I think it was like a day later, you're like, yeah, man, that setup works. And I was like, oh crap. So I was like, you know what, let me try and reach out, and finally got you some downtime to get on here. So how's it been hanging, dude? How's deer season?
Deer season was good. I only hunted deer this year really in Minnesota, and I mule deer hunted for a couple of days in Idaho. And outside of that, I wasn't deer hunting. I was elk hunting the rest of the time, and antelope hunting in August. But I shot a nice whitetail in Minnesota. That was my first time hunting in the Midwest. I'd never done that before. And slid a Jeep off a mountainside in Idaho. And
yeah, heard that story.
Didn't see crap for deer. Like, saw one legal buck the last morning before we had to drive back. So
can you tell that story? Can you tell that Jeep story real quick? Because
sure.
I listen to y'all's podcast a lot, like probably every week. And when I forget what the title was, but it was something like "We Almost Lost MFJJ."
Yeah,
I instantly clicked on it because I'm like, what does that mean? And then I heard the story, and I was
just in the job to do clickbait, even though it's a real thing. It's he'll give you a title that makes you go, God, I need to listen to that.
Well, it worked.
Look at that. Got a talent for it. So yeah, we were hunting up in the higher mountain areas, and down where we hunt, there's large open areas, lots of roads everywhere, road systems, because there's farmland, ag, and free range cattle. So you can get a truck almost anywhere, but it's always sketchy depending on the time of year and what the weather's like. Because one, if it's wet, it'll turn to a greasy pig really quick, and it's hard to have any kind of control or traction. And if it snows, you got to get chains on real quick. Well, it hadn't hardly snowed. It snowed like a couple weeks before, and then it warmed up, and then it got real cold. So there was almost no snow anywhere, little bits here and there, little pockets, until you got up really high, which is about as far as you can take a rig, period. They eventually run out of roads to where you can't, where you're on foot, and it's higher elevation. So if you don't live down there, breathing's quite a challenge, which I never thought it would be so difficult until I experienced it. And I was like, man, I get like trying to acclimatize to high elevation, because that stuff is brutal. But in any event, we're going up the first morning. We're almost to the point, like my buddy Brandon wants to get dropped off on this far ridge as far as this road goes. And he's going to hike his way down. And then I'm going to go up to this other ridge point and work my way down that other system and hike our way down to the bottom, and then have Pappy pick us up in the Jeep. And we're coming around a corner in a really shaded area, and there's a little bit of snow, not much. Looks like maybe a half inch, nothing to get too excited about. And Pappy's going along and hits the snow, and all of a sudden starts spinning out, and you hear him gas it, trying to get across it. And you stop going forward and start going backwards. And he just starts screaming, get out, get out, get out. And Brandon jumps out, and I'm in the front, and Brandon's behind me. And I've got my hand on the door, and I'm starting to open it. And then I see Brandon right in the way. So I stop and I wait, because I didn't want to hit him with the door trying to open it. And as soon as he cleared, I started pushing the door open, and I felt the ass end of the rig go down. And so I just slammed the door and went like this and closed my eyes and just sat there. And I watched, like, Brandon and I locked eyes as we went over, because he was staring. He hit the ground, turned around, looked at me. I looked at him, and I went like that, and he lost sight of me. And I just shut my eyes and like went, okay, this is it. Like mentally was like,
Yeah.
I'm dead. And the Jeep stopped. It slid a bit, stopped, and got a small tree managed to lodge itself underneath the rear axle.
Mm-hmm.
I was facing the downhill side. I came to rest, and the front tire was off the ground like it was ready to roll over. Brandon got himself down to us and jumped on the front tire to put weight on the right side of the rig. And we just sat there for a minute, and I looked at Pappy and looked at me and just like, you okay? Oh, shit. Like it was, if that tree didn't catch us, there was one other tree we might have hit, maybe 15, 20 yards down. But if we cleared that, it was 200 yards down like that. And there's no way either of us had lived through it. That thing would have been crushed. There's no roll cage in it. So you'd tumble down and just, done deal. So I popped the door open and waited, didn't shift. And I put my legs to get out and then dove out and sprinted around the rig to make sure whatever I did didn't push it down. And then I got on Brandon's side, I went to the rear tire, got up on the rack and just lifted my weight back. And then Pappy got himself out and ended up hiking down. Went back down the road a ways, ran into somebody driving up the road, said, hey, you don't want to go up there. Like we just slid a Jeep off there. It's nasty. And ironically, there was like someone had made a little campfire at that same spot in the road and then had walked out. So I think somebody else slid a rig off right there like the day before. And there was like an empty one or two seltzer cans, right? And then as you're walking down the hill, there was an empty pack of cigarettes and a glove. And you're like, somebody did the exact same thing we did and got it out. Managed to call a wrecker in town and got himself up there and roped himself and winched himself off with the trees and pulled the Jeep out and we drove it out. Hunted with it the next couple of days, and the whole way down, Pappy was just so mad at himself. And I'm like, what are you doing? You know how fucking lucky we are right now?
Yeah.
Do you have any idea how lucky we are? Like, we should both be dead. And we're not. And to boot, the only person who's hurt at all is Brandon bitching about his hip because he hit a rock when he dove out of the rig. Like, how are you mad right now? Man. You did nothing wrong. Anybody else driving the exact same thing would have happened. It wouldn't have mattered if it was me, you, or Brandon driving. Stop blaming yourself.
Yeah.
We're very lucky, and I'm happy as hell that we're walking out of here right now because we shouldn't be. So that's the story.
Dude, that's an act of God right there with that tree. That's insane.
Yeah, it felt like it.
That's insane. Yeah, I mean, Georgia, we've got mountains, but compared to what y'all probably have, it's like hills,
Oh, sure. Yeah, that was I think we're probably about 8,500 feet or so. Man. And it's all steep and there's not like it's where the trees start again. So there's not a bunch of trees until you get up a ways. So there's like nothing down there. Like if you start going down this steep ass shit, you're gonna roll a long ways.
That's insane, dude. Yeah, I remember listening to that story for the first time and my jaw was just dropped. Like as soon as, because when you describe like looking over the edge, I know I hunt and I do hunt out of a tree, but I'm scared of heights. So like seeing that, I'd have been freaking out, man.
Yeah, the first time I went down there and hunted with them in late season, I want to say it was the year before. Pretty sure it was the year before. And it took me like a day and a half to adjust to what they were doing because I was freaking out the whole time.
Yeah.
Didn't want to look like a wuss or nothing, so I'm not saying anything, but the whole time, like, we're totally gonna die. Like, there's no way we live through this because there was a whole bunch of snow and pretty much driving around on chains and low air tires and going in places I'd think twice about taking my freaking expedition Polaris, like, and we're just driving around a Jeep and I'm like, dude, this is scary. But they're from there and they've done it their whole lives and it doesn't feel any different. So you don't see it and you're not experienced with it. By the third day, I was just like, oh, okay, this is normal. I'm not worried. We're fine.
Yeah, you get used to it.
And then I got totally used to it. And then I got exposed to that. Then I slid off and I was like, maybe I should be used to this. It's a really bad idea.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, because I follow Cam Haynes a lot, and I know he's up near you guys, right?
So he's out of Eugene. or Springfield area, which is about 8 hours south.
Oh, wow.
So if you go, Eugene's on, I think it's still off kind of through the other side of the state, but I can get there in about 8 hours. I basically drive across the state southwest to like Portland area,
Mm-hmm.
and then head south, trying to bypass Portland because of the traffic, and follow the main Interstate 90 all the way down there, or I-5, excuse me, Interstate 90's east-west. It's ours, I-5.
Some highway.
Yeah, I've been to Eugene 3 or 4 times. When I was married, we would frequently go to the coast. My ex-wife was very afraid of flying, always had issues with traveling, etc. So I was like, all right, we need to find somewhere we can drive to that still feels like a vacation. And we would always go to the Oregon coast central area, Lincoln City, Newport,
Yeah.
those areas. And it's and you're almost at the same vertical position in Oregon as Eugene. So you can actually drive to Eugene pretty easily. It's like adds an hour to the trip if you want to. But yeah, been to Eugene a couple of times, been to Wayne Shop, did an elk-shaped camp out of the Endicott Farms.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cam's real close to where we're actually staying on that camp. But,
I got you. Yeah, I just, man,
I personally met him.
You never personally met him?
I've never personally
Really?
met him.
Dude, I get excited when I shared his podcast episode with Waddell, because I've had Waddell on and I get to chat with him every now and then. So I was like, man, I look up to both these guys. I'm gonna share it. He sent me the prayer hands on Instagram, and I was like, oh my, I freaked out. I was like, what? Like, I wanted to talk to him about coming on here, but see, the thing is, Cam, and I look at, and I say this with all the respect in the world, but Westies like y'all are so much different than any other hunter, I feel like, because y'all have to basically climb a mountain to kill the animal you're after. And what that takes.
Yep.
I mean, it's because I've been to Colorado a few times. My uncle hunts out of there, and I keep trying to go out there for muleys, but life and family gets in the way of that sometimes. But even he told me, he's like, dude, a year before you come out here, you're going to have to train. He's like, you're going to have to get your cardio up. You're going to have to get I think you said something about like those O2 bottles or whatever. You have to sort of train for that. And it just blows my mind that you guys can, basically run up those things like billy goats, and it's nothing,
we're definitely a different type of hunter, but hunting in the style of hunting that's more traditional from, your Georgia area or whatnot, is a completely different skill set.
Yeah.
And there's so much to it. And I've tried to learn a lot about that type of hunting because I try to implement some of those things here, because there's a lot of pre-work you can do and a lot of planning you can do and a lot of scouting you can do that allow you the ability to shorten your hunting season or be more prepared for the time that you have. Because, we have short seasons here.
Yeah. Y'all seasons are very short.
Yeah. Our season for deer is 30 days long. And then our late season, or it's not, I think it's 25 days long. And then our late season's another 20 or something like that. So that's the amount of time you have to kill a deer as an archer, which is the most generous thing they give you.
Yeah.
Right.
That's insane. Because here we get like 5 months, like from September to January. And I mean, I'm scouting all the time. Like today I was scouting, freshen up some cameras and put, we can bait over here. So I kind of want to help the deer move along when the food's not really available right now. And, that's basically my off season is, I hunt public down the street, scouted there last week. It is a lot different, but I won't lie. I thought about you guys when I was scouting. And the reason being is me and my buddy found there's this one ridge. I say it's pretty steep. It's probably like 700-foot elevation. So it's nothing, but to my fat ass, it's kind of like I'm having to hoof it, but we went down into the creek after I set my camera up and found a ton of sign, like scrapes, rubs, tracks, all of that. And then we turn around to go back out, and he looks at me and he goes, "You ready?" I was like, I was looking up at it like, that was a lot smaller going down. Yeah. Let's go. Like, we just did it. But I was thinking of you guys. I'm like, all right, what would Cam and Josh say? They tell me to stop being a bitch and just go up it. So
You
I just had to.
got to get out either way. So you might
Yeah.
do it.
I mean, you could follow the creek, but like that property where we were at, the creek goes for 2 to 3 miles. And
Yeah.
you'd be all the way up the road and then have to walk back. So what's the point, you know? So yeah, I don't know. I feel like there are similarities, but there's definitely major differences. So
Sure.
before we get into, because I've said this too already, I really want to cover the arrow topic. But I am curious. You're in Washington, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Blacktails. What's it like hunting blacktails? Because that's a deer species I've always wanted to go after.
They're on the west side. I never have.
Oh,
So
what?
I'm 5 hours to 6 hours from where blacktail are for the most part.
I got you.
Areas you could hunt them because the west side's so populated. You got to get through the populace to get to where you can hunt blacktails for the most part on the peninsula. So I've never actually hunted them. It's something I want. I just haven't done it yet.
Don't they have them in Oregon though?
Same thing. It's west side. So
blacktails geography.
Blacktails traditionally are near, at least in the states. Those states are near a lot of moisture and coast, so they're more of a coastal deer.
I gotcha.
Mule deer are more of either high mountain or scabland, and then whitetail are more egg related for the most part, typically. Mountain whitetail too, but in general, that's usually where you find your populations. And for us, that's to hunt blacktail over there. Same thing like Roosevelt elk. There's Roosevelt elk on the western side of Washington. I've also never hunted Roosevelt.
Huh. Well, it just goes to show how much I know about Washington and Oregon. I'm thinking everything is just, Pacific Northwest woods that you got blacktails. Actually,
we've got legit like rainforest in the west. We've got deserts and scablands, and we've got mountain ranges and oceans, lakes, rivers, and eggland. I mean, we have like every type, pretty much every type. We don't have any glaciers or anything like that, but outside of that, we have pretty much every type of natural terrain that exists throughout the state, depending on where you go.
That's crazy. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's very unique. Yeah.
So
a little bit of everything.
One last thing about blacktails, since you're kind of over there, and I don't really do a lot of, I guess, research on them because I'm 3,000 miles away. But is it in y'all state that there's that highway that divides them between blacktails and muleys?
Yeah, I want to actually.
It's like Highway 5, right?
I know there's a Rocky Mountain Roosevelt. That's I want to say it's determined by the Rocky Mountains. So like west, that's where their dividing line is. I'm not sure where they divide it on the blacktail. It probably would be a highway, I would think.
Okay.
And then there's like a hybrid portion, and depending on what side of a line you shoot it on, you get credit for it being this or that. There's a lot of Rocky Mountain Roosevelt hybrids where you'll get a Roosevelt elk that's got more of a Rocky Mountain rack on it. If you can manage to be successful and draw a tag in the right units, because any of the premium stuff is typically draw only, and it takes a lot of points to draw.
I got you. Man, it's so out there. It blows my mind, dude. Like
in this state, you can hunt if you draw a tag, which some of the stuff's really hard to draw, but you can hunt a black-tailed deer, a mule deer, a white-tailed deer, a Rocky Mountain elk, a Roosevelt elk, a mountain lion, a black bear, a bighorn ram, a mountain goat, and we have antelope, but you can't hunt them yet, and moose. But like drawing a moose tag, it'll take you your whole life.
Yeah.
Same with the goat, same with the bighorn. And we have wolves, but we can't hunt them yet. Yeah. Which no, in this state we never. But yeah, I like there's what was that, like 9 different subspecies of animal that are all in one state.
Jeez, dude.
It's unique.
I gotta come up there and go hunt it. Because my uncle's from Washington originally, I think. It's one of the 2 states, Washington or Oregon, but he used to hunt blacktails up there, and I mentioned it to him. He's like, "Oh yeah, man, we could go up there anytime you want." I was like, "Don't tempt me, dude." Because
so Oregon and Washington both have Weyerhaeuser land, which is like timber company land, And they have property where there's a decent amount of blacktail. So that would be wise. You do have access, but it's like non-motorized, I want to say, but I think you can use bikes if I
Okay.
remember.
That's how it is here.
There's a decent amount of land available, even though there's a lot of populace to try to hunt blacktail over
Gotcha.
there.
Well, I'm gonna add that to my list because muleys and blacktail and caribou are my top three that I want to go after.
Caribou is
Um,
on my high one. Yeah, it's probably my top two, top three. I really
yeah,
like it.
that I'm telling you, man, I gotta do it in the next 10 to 15 years before
Mhm.
because I'll be 29 next month and I'm not getting any younger, you know.
And
So
it's just going to get more expensive
I
too. I know.
know.
I fell in the trap of waiting till I felt like I'd made enough money to warrant spending the money on that.
Yeah.
If I would have done all this that I want to do 15 years ago, it would cost 1/10 of what it costs today to go do it.
Yeah, the costs are just insane. Because last I checked, it was like 10 grand for a guided caribou hunt. But now I haven't even looked because it's got to be higher, right?
Well, I'd imagine, and a lot of that I think is partially the popularity has grown.
Yeah.
Although I think it's back on a slight decline, but it would be hard to maintain the growth that we had over COVID and keep all those people in the sport. But I think it's more a matter of quality of hunting opportunities
Mhm.
are worse. So people are more apt to say, screw it, I'm going to pay for a guided hunt. And then the guided industry goes up.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
I think, but I could be wrong.
That's how business works, man. All right.
Yeah.
Well, look, we got all the fun stuff out of the way. Now let's talk business. Arrows. As you know, I had Troy, the ranch fairy on, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And as everybody knows, Troy is a huge pusher of ridiculously heavy arrows.
Yep.
And you and I discussed a little bit about this earlier that the applications do work in specific situations.
Yes.
But everything I've heard from you has always been 400 to like me. I think the heaviest you've ever said to my recollection is like 440 something. I could be wrong on that.
Personal use, with
Yeah.
the exception of one time, I've never used anything heavier than 440, and I've never had a penetration problem. But I know how to tune a bow,
This
and
is
that's
true.
usually got a decent amount to do with it. And that's the part where that's kind of where Troy and I first started talking originally, was more based on he was curious about tuning because he didn't understand it very well. And the conversation went towards arrows and weights and whatnot, but the intent of that original conversation that him and I and Brandon had was all supposed to be based on him trying to understand tuning, which I was trying to get him to understand the importance of it, and more than willing to show him face to face in person how to tune all kinds of stuff and understand how it works.
Mhm.
So he can hopefully in turn pass that knowledge on to other people, because he is a public figure, no different than myself or Dudley or Dan or T-Bone. We're all out there putting content out to a degree to try to help, is the premise, right? But I feel there's some things being left out of what he's saying, and that's my concern. Does shooting a really heavy arrow work? Yeah, yeah. Slowing down a bow, making it less extreme, is typically going to make it fly better. I learned that when I was, oh God, I think I was 13 or 14, and I had my first experience of trying to actually broadhead tune.
Mhm.
And my dad's solution to it was, here, this arrow's really stiff. Try that. It's heavier. Stuck it through it and it worked great. And I went,
Yeah.
oh, okay, cool. Because I didn't know any better. I didn't understand why it wasn't working right. Whereas when you get presented with those things, it's an opportunity to understand what's going wrong.
Mhm.
That's where the information falls short, and where the lack of what he's doing is coming from. Like you're telling people, just manipulate your arrow to get it to shoot right out of the bow, which does work, but it's the arrow's bending around the bow instead of straight up and down at that point, because you're dealing with a left to right variant that shouldn't ever exist in a compound that's tuned
Yeah.
correct. You should never have left to right variant. Left to right variants are from letting go with your hand and forcing the arrow to go left to right. Right. If you fire a bow with a release aid, your arrow wants to bend up and down. If you're getting really erratic flight, it's not bending fully up and down. It's going left or it's going right as it
Mhm.
flexes out of the bow, because the spine's wrong or the tune's wrong or the cam orientation's wrong, rest position's wrong. There's all kinds of different variables to create that. And if you play with your spine and your tip weight enough, you can get that arrow that's bending out of your bow slightly sideways to flex equally and look like it's flying straight. And that's what he's experiencing in his tuning method or his tuning technique to tune the arrow to the bow, not the bow to the arrow.
Okay.
And my premise is, why aren't we doing both?
See, that's what makes sense to me. Have them both tuned.
Well, his belief is that the average guy will never do it.
Well,
It's like, if the average guy's going to dick with what you're dicking with, he would dick with the other if he understood how.
yeah, true.
Which is my purpose. I am trying. It's going to take me a couple of years, but I am trying really hard to put out as much knowledge and information of how to do this yourself as possible, so it's not scary. So more people are understanding what their bow's doing, because it's embarrassing to me that this industry that I'm in doesn't have any certifications or anything like that to be a bow mechanic.
Really?
No
So
requirements. All you
in...
need is the description that says I'm a bow technician.
Huh.
There's certifications. There's no ASC certified. There's no apprentice journeyman program. There's none of that. Right. So the difference between shop A, shop B, shop D, and shop J is God knows what, because there's not a learning thing involved. And
did not know that.
Because of the experience I've had over the years and knowing that it seems like 1 out of every 10 archery shops nationally probably really knows what they're doing, and 9 out of 10 probably really don't. The only thing that I can do is put out a whole bunch of information. And if that means that shops that are watching it are learning, great. If that means their customers are watching it and learning and then turning around and going to that shop and asking them about it, forces them to learn, great. I want everyone to get better, because at the end of the day, these tools are way more effective than you think they are.
Yeah.
And you're only limited by your ability to make it actually shoot an arrow straight out of the bow and consistently downrange. And that's where you'll start to run into big variances when you're trying to tune a bow the wrong way or trying to tune an arrow to a bow, is you will typically run into a left-right variant you can't get rid of as you start to get out to distance. And that's limiting your accuracy. Now, you would never know that if you never shot past 40 yards.
Yeah.
Because you're shooting enough distance to know. And like we were talking about earlier with the difference between a Western and an Eastern hunter, Western hunters are forced to shoot farther away. We don't have the same scenarios and we don't have the same environments as an Eastern hunter does. And that's not to say Eastern hunters don't shoot far away. I'm sure there's a percentage of them that do. But if you want to look at what really makes a bow accurate and what really makes a bow perform well, look at who's hunting Western.
Yeah.
Because it has to. Because I can't get away with, I can't shoot past 40 yards.
Yeah, you won't be able to heal anything.
I'll have a really hard time being effective.
Yeah.
And when a configuration that you're telling people to use, i.e., 550 to 750, you shouldn't shoot that past 40 yards ever.
Yeah, if you even could.
You can
effectively,
It'll even be effective. It's going so slow that animal has an eternity to move.
Yep.
And I brought it up when I was having the conversation with him and Brandon, was the number one problem I have seen over my life, which, mind you, I've been working in a pro shop since I was 11 years old. I'm 44. I'll be 45 in May. I've worked on more bows than probably, I don't know anybody who's worked in a pro shop for 35 years or 34 years. And up until the last 5 years, I was the main technician, period. Like that entire time. So that's 30 years of, I don't think I've ever worked less than 50 hours a week. And I've probably worked 70 hours a week a lot of my life from adult. Okay. Yeah. Pre-adult, it was in the summer, I worked 50, 60 hours a week, but during the school year, it was maybe 10 to 20 hours a week. So the number of hours of working on a bow and dealing with a different bow and another different bow and another different bow and another different bow is crazy for me. I don't know anybody who's done that. Now, that's not to talk myself up. It's the number of experiences and encounters I have should supersede any human being.
Yeah. I mean, you're just telling, the experience that you have. And I mean, going like what you just said about different bows coming in, I shoot an Obsession, right? And the bow shop I took it to, thankfully, one of the new guys worked with Obsession, actually helped design the bow that I have. But when I took it up there the first time, he set it up, everything was good, right? Like he tore it apart, knew what he was doing, was shooting bullet holes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided to try and bare shaft tune, just for fun, and kept having a consistent knock right high flight,
Mm-hmm.
thinking that the bow, should shoot it straight because I was testing different point weights and all that stuff.
Sure.
So of course I moved my rest. Shouldn't have done that. Moved it up, down, left, right. Got it back to kind of where I thought it was supposed to be, but I'm like, dude, I need to get a new D loop anyway. So I took it back, and they were able to set it back up, but it took a lot longer because Mark's the guy's name. He was not there,
Yeah.
and none of the other guys really knew Obsession like that. So,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, I understand what you're saying about seeing different bows in the shop because all they sell is Matthews, Prime, Hoyt, just the big names, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of why I guess really I gravitate towards your channel, is because you guys just are educational. You tell it like it is. You're not pushing one specific product. You're like, and you even say you're not sponsored by any of these guys. You just tell the truth. Like you're trying to help these people as opposed to saying, hey, go buy this specific arrow with this broadhead and you'll never have a problem.
Sure.
I see that all over the place.
Well, that's the majority of what's out there because that's the easiest way to get sponsored is to grow a YouTube channel or an Instagram and talk about products and have
Yeah.
a decent following. And then those same companies will reach out to you and try to bribe you. So it really boils down to like,
Yeah.
hey, we'll pay you $5,000 a year to use this, or we'll pay you $2,000 a year to use this, or $10,000 a year to use this. That would totally defeat my purpose.
Yep.
And I would lose all whatever what I may be saying may be the most honest, truthful thing on the planet. But if I start taking money, you're going to have a percentage of people that are no longer going to believe you.
Yeah.
And most people that are trying to do this are doing it for that purpose. They're trying to either be a professional hunter or, get notoriety or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I just want people to get better. And I sell all this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. There's no, that is my revenue. Right.
Yeah.
But if I carry all of it, there's no reason for me to be pushing A over B over C because I carry it all and I sell it all and I don't care what you buy. It doesn't matter to me. Whatever you want to use, I'm down with. I may even start like reviewing products that I can't sell, like direct to consumer stuff, because there's not going to be any variable comparisons.
Yeah.
When I start getting farther down the rabbit hole of arrows and I start really doing a lot of broadhead stuff, sight stuff, rest stuff that I haven't done a ton of, but I'm going to do a lot of it. I may give a fair comparison of those things too, because no one that sells the other is going to have it. Right.
Yeah.
So I want a resource that everyone can go to compare things equally.
Yeah.
And hopefully you're learning stuff because I'll ramble about crap while I'm doing things. And there's knowledge in there because I've just done it so much. I overlook a lot of it, to be honest. Like for the longest time when I was just helping Dan and I wasn't even doing my own YouTube channel, I would talk to him while I was working on something or whatnot. And he'd be like, man, there was so much good information in there. I was like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I was just talking about something while I did something. It didn't occur to me, right?
Yeah.
And then
autopilot.
it is, but even like my stuff now, I have zero real prep into any of it. Like I'll have like if I'm reviewing a bow, I'll write down the stats of what it is and the price. And that's about it. And preset it up at the length and the weight and whatnot and close to the poundage, but check it and make sure. I don't have like bullet points or anything like that I want to cover. I get manufacturers reaching out saying, I wish you would have mentioned this or that. And I'm like, look, I'm not an advertising window for you.
Yeah. You're just
not what I am.
Product.
You don't pay me.
Yeah.
Right. And I caught on some points that stood out to me or some things that you did different that I liked or some things that you did different that maybe I didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
And
Which they can improve on.
which you can improve on. And I've been telling them these things for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
But for a long time they wouldn't listen. I'm like, all right, fine. And now that I make stuff myself as well, if I contact a manufacturer, give them a suggestion and they don't take it, I'll just do it myself. Fine. I don't care. I have access to a buddy of mine who owns a fabrication business, a large one, and liked archery. So he's like, okay, well, let's make this then. And here you go. Here's the product that you wouldn't listen that I was been trying to give you for a year.
Yeah.
You know, it's an
That's
interesting,
crazy.
it's an
Well, like
interesting solution, but I just want to make the sport better.
yeah. And I mean, I can't lie. I'm guilty of, the whole product placement thing. We're partnered with VPA, Nimrod Archery. Like, I like their stuff. But the
Mhm.
thing is that, yeah, in the ad, I'll be like, look, you won't be disappointed. But that's just because it's what I believe. You know what I mean? Like, I've shot a bunch of different mechanicals, I've
Mhm.
shot a bunch of different fixed blades, and I'm a fan of single bevel, but I also am not, getting my arrows built to be 700 grains. And I'm not knocking Troy, but it's like, I want to be able to kill out to 50 if need be.
Well,
So,
how can a guy say that it's 90% the broadhead, which is what I wanted him to acknowledge? Because that's what I thought. I think it's 90 to 95% the broadhead.
yeah,
And then
which makes
so
sense.
why are you putting so much emphasis on weight? If it's the broadhead,
Yeah.
not the arrow, why are you forcing this heavy stuff down people's throats?
So my question to get back on the arrow thing is, obviously you're shooting much lighter than Troy and you haven't had any issues. I think if I remember right, you said you've only had one arrow that didn't pass through, and that's because it hit like a bone of some sort, right?
Talk about the opposite shoulder.
Okay.
Yep.
So you're getting through stuff. And some people might argue, oh, well, of course he's got a 31-inch or 30-inch draw length and 70 pounds, blah blah blah. But even then, because I shot 450 last year.
Let's address that part first.
Yeah,
Right?
hey, by all means.
If people are saying, oh, well, he's got that, more weight or more draw length. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Every pound is roughly 2 foot a second, and every inch of draw length is roughly 12 foot a second, depending on the bows. And bows now are, let's say, peaking at 350.
Mm-hmm.
When I started shooting 400 grain arrows, bows were peaking at 310. Do the math, and you tell me if it really matters that much. I'm telling you, it doesn't. It's the broadhead you use. You go grab a broadhead that's designed to penetrate. If you're worried about passing through an animal, right? You go get yourself a broadhead that's designed to penetrate. You can put that broadhead behind almost any arrow as long as it's adequate spined. That's where the mistakes typically happen, is people aren't using the right spine arrow. And no knocking to Troy, it happens a lot because they're putting a shit ton of weight in the front of it and they're not using a stiffer arrow because they hear his message, but they don't hear all of it. Right? Same thing, 2 to 350.
I did that.
Yeah, it's underspined as hell.
Yeah,
it's not
I did that at first.
Well, that's what they think, right? They don't think anything different of it, and they put a bunch of weight in the front of it. Now it's 600 grains. Like, yeah, but it's 150 deflection points weak. Like, it's not going to fly good.
Yeah,
you have to have the right. Nothing is more important than the arrow spine being right. If you got to put me in a vacuum and give me a choice between a 400, a 500, or 600 grain arrow, and they're different spines, I'm going to use the spine that's right. First, period. I'm not going to gravitate towards the lighter arrow if it's not the right spine.
Yeah.
It's so important. And that goes back to a well-tuned projectile. If that arrow is not flexing equally, it is bleeding energy every time it flexes.
Mm-hmm.
So when it gets 30 yards away or 40 yards away, it's bled off a crap load of its ability to penetrate.
Yeah,
because
it's too busy trying to correct.
Yeah. It's not that complicated.
You said one thing a while back that really got me kind of thinking. You said one thing that was paper tuning for a broadhead, and correct me if I'm wrong. I can tell you know what I'm talking about. Paper tuning for a broadhead, you don't need to do it, is basically what I got from it.
I believe what I said was it's stupid.
Yes, that's exactly what you said. And my buddy JD was on a podcast the week after you said that, and he said it exactly like you. And I was like, bro, you sound just like MFJJ right now. And he's like, well, it's stupid. And I'm like, okay, let's go, man. I clipped it and everything. It was cool. But what's the, because I know that like I've gone through the tuning broadheads thing, right? Moving the rest like a hair somehow magically makes both broadhead and field point hit the same spot as long as your bow is tuned and you have the right spine arrow. But what is, I guess, a more in-depth description of what you mean by paper tuning for a broadhead is stupid?
Okay, because after you do that process, you're still going to go out and shoot a field point and a broadhead at the target, right?
Yeah.
And try to make sure they hit each other.
Mhm.
You're going to do the exact same thing. Let's call that step 3, right? And step 2 is shooting your broadhead through paper. Step 1 is shooting your arrow through paper. Fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Step 2 and step 3 are doing the same thing. So why does step 2 matter? Just shoot your field point and your broadhead.
Yeah, that's what I did.
Same thing. You're wasting your time because because if you get that broadhead and field point or that broadhead to shoot through paper perfect and you go out there and it's still not hitting where your field point is, are you moving your rest?
I would.
Well, then why the fuck did you do step 2?
Because it's fun.
Same stuff.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Skip it.
I'm kidding.
If you get an authentically good pull through paper with a field point, like authentically good, and your broadhead's the same weight as your field point, it's not going to be that far off. Yeah. It's not going to be so far off that you're going to walk out to 20 yards and miss the target. That's why step 1 matters.
Yeah.
If you couldn't miss the target with a broadhead and a field point out of a poorly tuned bow at 20 yards, I don't even know if I'd paper tune. I would probably just go shoot a broadhead and a field point. Yeah. Because that's what you're going to be is your determining factor on what is correct, right? And that is a truly correctly tuned bow, is if you can get your broadhead and field point to hit in the same spot, you have a perfectly tuned bow. Don't touch it. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care if the left or right is nowhere near where the factory says it is. I don't care if your cams are like that. Does your broadhead and your field point hit in the same spot at multiple distances? The answer is yes. Don't dick with it anymore. That's as good as you can get it to function.
When you said that the first time and we kind of said it on the podcast, I actually put that into practice because the previous bow I had to this obsession, I did not paper tune. I bought it, threw a rest on, eyeballed everything, and then went out and shot field point and broadhead. And I got into so many arguments with buddies of mine that are like, oh man, you got to paper tune it, this and that. I'm like, why do I need to paper tune it? If I shoot it, the broadhead goes where I'm aiming. I shoot it again, the field point goes where I'm aiming. What's the point? It's obviously flying.
There is a reason.
Okay. Tell me what the reason is.
So it depends on if you're paper tuning your bow correctly.
I didn't paper tune it at all.
I know, but there's a reason for paper tuning.
Okay.
So a well paper tuned bow, you typically never move the arrow rest. You're moving cable orientation or wheeling adjustment. Right. So moving, like grabbing bow brand X, slapping a rest on 13/16, loop on perfectly level, walking over to the paper and shooting paper, and you don't get a hole. The last thing I'm going to do is move the arrow rest.
So you're going to be looking at the cams and all
doing wheeling, and I'm doing timing.
Okay.
Because a bow that's designed right, now some brands aren't designed right, and that's not a bash on the brand. It's, do they have level knock travel? Okay. So if you have eccentrics or wheels that aren't equal with each other, it won't travel a straight line as you draw it from rest to draw and back to rest. And that's where up and down issues will typically come from.
Okay.
Is it not a level line? Now, when you take a equal but opposite eccentric and then take one twist in a cable and make it out of time, you're no longer pulling it on a straight line. You're now uneven. You're getting either a knock high position or a knock low position because it's not even and it's not traveling on a straight line. If every bow was built in a manner which it would always track perfectly straight down the middle, you would set your rest at the factory recommended position, your knock height perfectly flat, and it would probably tune 2 or 3 different spines of arrow exactly the same.
Really?
You'd get a clean hole with like a 300, a 250, and a 350 out of a 70-pound bow with 125 to 150 total weight in the front at like 28 inches would probably tune, period. Any 3. Okay. So if you set those things correctly and you haven't looked at the timing or wheeling and you walk over to paper and shoot it and it's not a hole, there's something wrong with your timing or your wheeling. It's not your rest position. But the easy solution is to move your rest depending on how much wheeling we're talking about here.
Yeah.
So if your trigger's only that big left or right, you can probably get it out with the arrow rest, but you probably shouldn't. You should probably be moving your wheeling.
Why?
Because it's moving the ass end of your arrow.
Got it. Okay.
So when
See,
you're
here's
moving,
the thing.
you're moving the tail.
Yeah.
And your rest is still leaving in the optimal functioning position, like right down the freaking central point of it, which is what you want. Because if you can get that to leave down the central point, your sight's going to be square, your levels that you set are going to orientate correctly, and your bow's rotational points are working the way they're supposed to. When you start moving your arrow rest out of square, you're fighting the rotational points.
I got you. See, I'm going to be honest with you. I do not know as much about bows as I would like to say I do about arrows. So I'm learning a lot because some people, like my bow has yokes on it, but it's only on the top. And so someone's like, oh, just change the yokes. And I'm like, what does that mean?
A hybrid style.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So your cam at the top and your cam at the bottom are different from each other. So that's like a Hoyt cam and a half or a Darton CPS is really what that is.
Okay.
You probably don't have perfect knock travel, which is why it can be a little finicky. Do you have, so I haven't looked at Obsession in a while. Does it have a draw stop on the top and the bottom or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's got them on both?
Yeah.
And are they slotted or is it drilled hole fixed position?
I want to say it's slotted.
Okay. So the problem with that kind of system, and it's why I don't like those kind of systems, because there's several of them out there. There's no definite point that the cams are supposed to sit. There's no way to tell. Okay. So when you at least have drilled holes in the cams for peg position, one set on 29.5, this one set on 29.5, and they touch at the same time. If you have a slotted channel, if I twist a cable, I just move the draw peg and make it touch again, right? So basically what you're doing is nowhere to infinitely set the timing exactly the same. And that's the hard part about a bow like that. If you can get it to tune and you can get it to operate relatively correctly, but there's no way to know it's actually.
So could you tell that by paper tuning? Because when we did mine, they had to, like when we first set this thing up, they moved. So they got everything square, right? We shoot it. They move the rest. Still not working right. It's still not hitting, bullet holes and all of that. They move it again, still nothing. So they had to do some, I believe they shimmed it, like either moved the shims or did something with the shims. Again, I'm not a bow tech, so I was just standing there watching.
So shims or yokes. So you can do something with a yoke that's very similar to shimming a cam. You're in essence moving the position that the string comes in and out of the cam at, left or right.
Okay.
What you're doing with a wielding adjustment. And it's the same thing you can do with a yoke adjustment. So if you got your yoke, right?
Yeah.
You twist this side, it pulls this limb down and moves the cam from this to this, which is moving the string track over.
Really?
Okay. So yeah, you can actually do both. But all those wheeling adjustments, whether it's yokes or shims, is left to right adjustments. It's not up and down adjustments.
Got it.
So if you have a knock high tear, unless it's caused by contact, like you're fletching hitting something when it's leaving the bow, you shouldn't be adjusting left or right to fix it. You should be adjusting your timing to fix it. And when a bow doesn't have a definite timing point, there's no way to check it.
So would that be why maybe when I bear shaft tune, because I will say this now, like my arrows now fly great. I mean, they're perfect. But when I was messing around and did, the bear shaft tuning stuff, nothing I did fixed any of the issues. No heavier point, no lighter point.
Low? Low? Like, was your bear shaft dropping low?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's timing.
Okay.
And your bow doesn't have a timing point.
Well, dang, man.
So not to bum you out. So the solution to that, so the solution to that is you'd need a bow press, right? You can shoot that bow without the draw stops in it, right? Like if you take them out, it'll still stop, right?
I don't know. I've never tried it.
So I'd call Obsession and ask, if I take the draw stops out of this bow, will it still like, it should. And I've never seen a hybrid that gets locked up when you take them out. But there are like binaries that if you take them out, they'll get locked up. If you can shoot them without the draw stops, okay, take the draw stops out of the bow, shoot your shaft. And if you're getting a knock high, or not, or like a point low impact, or your arrow's diving,
Yeah.
put a twist in the control cable.
Okay.
Do it. And then keep twisting or untwisting the control cable until it shoots straight.
Gotcha.
And
And
then
that's bear shaft?
yeah, it's a bare shaft, or you can do the same thing with a fletched arrow through paper and watch your knock height change.
Okay.
So then when you
Yeah.
get to where it's actually flat, then draw the bow back in a draw board, reinstall the draw stops and have them lightly touching equally.
Okay.
And that's actually where your bow probably is timed correctly. But that's the only way to tell.
Got it. Yeah, I'll call Dennis probably next week and ask him, because he was just on last week. We were talking about all the new obsessions that came out, and I didn't even think about timing or anything. I'm just hearing all this new stuff, which it leads me to ask you actually, you do a lot of bow reviews? Are you looking at any of these new obsessions to test? Have you reached out to them, or
So if it's a
are you
company that
interested?
if I don't get asked for it a lot, I'm not going to carry it.
Okay.
And then if it's a bow I don't carry, they need to reach out to me and ask if I'll review them, and they'll send them and send it back. So that was APA.
Yeah.
They reached out to me and asked me if I would review their bow. And it was funny. The conversation was kind of like, so what do we have to do? It felt like they were asking me how much I was going to charge them to do it.
Yeah.
Send me a bow. You
It's
don't
that
want me
easy.
to do it? Put a label in the box and I'll send it back to you. I'll test anything. That's fine. I have no problem with it, but they have to send it to me. And it can't cost me anything to do it. Like
I got you.
I'll take the time to review them and put them up just like anybody else's. I've still got 15 or 20 to run through. Like there's 2 Athens or 3 Athens I haven't done yet. I only did the first one. I still haven't actually done a Title 36 because I didn't have one at the time. There's several price point reflective bows that I haven't tested yet that I still want to get to, because I want an equal measurement for everyone to compare everything.
Yeah.
So, when a guy's looking at a $400 bow or a $500 bow and a $900 bow, he should be able to measure the difference between those two somewhere.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to do. But be able to give you not just the number, my number that I put on it, but hey, here's the actual speed, here's the actual brace height, here's the actual, draw length, physical draw length that it measures out at, so you can compare it equally, so you can get a real fair number. So that this bow that's $400 cheaper is 15 feet a second slower actual than this bow.
Yeah.
Actual.
That was probably one of my favorite things you did, man, was checking the actual speed, because we all know that these companies will inflate the speeds. And I've always wondered, like the bows that claim, higher than 345. What is, and I've asked them before, like, what is on
secret
there?
sauce that they came up with that with?
Oh, I know the secret sauce.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you guys did a video on that, didn't you?
Actually, I've talked about it a couple times. I've never actually shown it, but I will. I intend to show, here's how the bow manufacturers actually got this speed. So here's a bow that they're claiming is this fast, and here's how fast I really shot it at, and here's how I made it actually get there.
It's by adjusting the chrono, isn't it?
No.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, I can't wait for that.
It's a combination of things that they do, and they all do it. But the purpose of my putting the actual speed tests in there was to make them stop doing it.
Well, I'm behind you on that,
And dude, all of them, but probably 3 that I've tested this year have stopped doing it.
Good.
Reasonable on what their variables are. So to give you an example, like let's say I take the string loop off the bow and just shoot a soft knot in a pullover loop string. It'll go faster. Are you gonna hunt with it that way?
No.
No, so you're never going to be able to get that speed out of it. So why would I test it that way? I shot a 350 grain arrow with no fletchings on it. Do you think it's going to go faster? Would you hunt with it that way? With no fletchings on it? I hope the answer is no.
No.
So why would I test it that way? If am I ever going to draw my bow back and fire it the second it hits the back wall?
No.
So why would I test it that way?
To make more money or to sell it.
Make it go fast. Go faster.
Man.
Would I take a bow that should have a 28 strand string in it and put a 24 strand string on it? That's not going to hold up and it's going to stretch real bad and break?
No.
Well, why would I test it that way then?
It's all the same answer, man.
A string that has 4 less strands and it will go faster. 100%.
Because it weighs less, right? Yep. This is why I enjoy y'all
Not
stuff
rule,
so
there's not
much.
rules in the speed testing that say you can't do any of that.
Huh.
And
So
that's how they come up with that. Plus, they'll have like 10 chronographs,
yeah.
and they'll through all 10 of them, and whichever one's the fastest is the one they'll use.
Do you see
That's
them?
how you come up with 8 or 10 extra feet a second that I'm not getting.
I got you. Do you see them like actually? Because I know Darton does it where it says speeds up to. And I think I've seen a few other companies do it where they're like speeds up to, but not saying this is the actual thing.
The
Do
uh
you
the
see them
PJ,
changing that?
the PJ Riley Lift 33 video argument. Is that what we're talking about? Okay,
Maybe. I
so
don't think so. I don't think I've seen
there's
that.
a there's an AMO measurement and or there's what's the words? What's the verbiage?
I
Sorry.
think it was
There's
IBO.
IBO and ATA,
Mm-hmm.
right? IBO is a 3D tournament. It is
Yep.
not a measurement. Okay. Nobody that I tested, I call after that. So PJ released a video on the Lift 33 that was talking about, hey, these bows are tested at IBO because they actually started speed testing a bow for the first time. They'd never done it. They'd always published what the speed was. They'd
Yeah.
never physically shot it through a chronograph. And for one reason or another, they started shooting bows through chronographs. And then that was their explanation as to why the speed was off. It's because, they measure these bows at IBO, not ATA. IBO states that you can shoot the bow at its maximum draw length.
Mm-hmm.
IBO states that you can shoot the bow at 80 pounds. Now, to put to rest at 80 pounds, it would have been faster than at 70 pounds. Well, you have to increase the arrow weight equally.
Yeah.
It is not any faster at all. It's the
Yeah.
same speed, whether you test that bow at 80 pounds, 70 pounds, or 60 pounds. And there's a video coming on that to show that, look, these things actually shoot the exact same speed if you equivalently adjust the arrow weight, which is what the rules say you have to do.
Didn't you do that with one? You shot one at 60 and it was like instead of 350, it was like 325 or something, wasn't it?
Because I couldn't get the bow. I
Yeah, I
couldn't
remember
get
that.
the correct one. I said, look, this is what I can get, and here's the math of what it would have come out with, because I didn't have an arrow that was the right weight either. But I will actually put out a video probably in the next 2 months that is, I'm going to use the Lift because I can swap the modules out and it's the same bow. So I'm not shooting bow A and bow B and bow C, where you
Mhm.
can make the argument, well, that bow was just fast. That
Yeah.
bow was slow. It's like, no, this is the same bow. And here's a 5 pound increment difference. And here's a 25 grain arrow weight difference the whole way down.
Hmm.
Here's your speed. Guess what? It's not any faster. It's the same speed.
That's crazy.
So, but that's how they're getting the fluffy speeds, is they're shooting without fletchings. They're shooting it in a machine where it hits the back wall and goes off immediately. They would run the draw length a little long, which is why I started measuring draw length. So they'd have to stop doing that.
Mm-hmm.
If I hand you a 30.5 inch draw length bow, it's going to be 7 feet a second faster than a 30-inch draw length bow. All you have to do is call that 30 inches.
Yep.
Well, there's 7 feet. It's magic. Our bow's faster. There is no magic pill. There is no secret weapon. Nobody's magically got a way faster bow than the next guy. If it pulls harder, it's faster. If it pulls smoother, it's slower. Brace height increases and decreases velocity a little bit, but that's it. If you measure out the specs, you're going to end up with similar speeds no matter what.
I'm learning so much. This is why I wanted to get you on, man.
Did you say you want to talk about arrows?
I know, right? Yeah. Hey, we're going to talk about arrows. We talked about it for like 5 minutes, but
Yeah.
I'm bringing it back. So, all right. So 400, 440, I guess would be like your minimum to maximum range. I know you shot less than that.
Yeah.
I am of the belief, and this is just what makes sense to me, because I shoot 70 pounds, 70, 72, how depending on where I end up. I haven't decided yet, but at 27.5 inches.
Mhm.
My bow is rated 348 IBO. And, I've shot it through the chronograph at the shop. I think when I first got it set up, I was at 28 inches. I was shooting 269 with a 483 grain arrow. Or I'm sorry, 450 grain arrow.
Okay.
Since then, I've gone up and I've got more arrows being built. It's probably going to be somewhere between 450, 465, something like that. But I've gone down 2 pounds and I've also gone down in draw length. So I feel like the happy medium for, someone of my size would be somewhere between 440 to I guess 470 would kind of be like the extreme end. What do you think about that? Because everything I've got, I know you preach 15% FOC or higher. Everything I've got is 15% or higher. So do you think there's like a happy medium for like the average size guy? Or does it really just vary on each person?
If you walk into my store and want to set up and don't have an opinion, you're probably getting somewhere between 425 and 475.
Okay.
That's where most people live and where most
Yeah.
boats perform better. The thing I was mentioning earlier about what's the number one problem I've ever ran into with customers and hunting, right? Is the animal moved before my arrow got there. I hear that more than I hear anything else. Oh, I didn't get good penetration. Or, man, I shot him great, but he just didn't seem to go down. I couldn't figure out why. Well, you didn't shoot him great. But the reality of it is the animal moves before your arrow gets there.
Mm-hmm.
That's the number one problem. What's the number one solution?
Go faster.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I would always err towards the lighter side as long as you're not giving up spine to do it and you're not giving up forward to center percentage. So if you have at least 15% forward to center, when you hit a hard object, it's hard to deflect the arrow. If you have 10%, it's easier for the ass end of the arrow to move because there's less mass in the front. That's part of why Troy's ridiculously heavy stuff works so well, is because it doesn't ever whip in the back because there's 20 something percent FOC.
Yeah.
Problem with 20 something percent FOC is when you get past like 30, 35 yards, it drops like a stone. And your broadhead and your field point also won't hit in the same spot anymore because there's drag downward on a broadhead that doesn't exist on the field point. I don't see a deviation in field point and broadhead at my lightweight stuff until I get to like 100 yards, and then it starts to move apart. So the slower you go and the more broadhead you have on the front, the more it's going to deviate sooner. There's no way around that. So to me, like, what are you worried about? Like, what's your concern? Like, if you go, okay, I'm going to go hunting and I'm hunting whitetails and I'm shooting 30 yards, what am I afraid of? What's my fear? What's keeping me up at night? What's making me go, God, is this the right thing? What is it?
Shoulder.
Hitting in the shoulder. Okay.
I had that happen last season, actually.
And what broadhead were you using?
The Q80 Exodus.
Okay. So you're shooting a broadhead that's not designed for penetration, it's designed for flight.
Really? I thought, okay. So, all right, let's open this up.
The broadhead angles, blades like this are not designed to penetrate. They're designed to get you to an optimum cutting diameter, least amount of weight.
Okay. I can see that.
So if your blade angle's like this, I mean, ideally you want a solid blade. You don't want a vented blade because one, it's more durable, and two, it makes less noise.
Mm-hmm.
So ideally you don't want vents. If you have vents, it's probably going to whistle a little bit more.
Yeah, I have noticed that.
If you make a broadhead that looks like this, it's a wedge.
Yeah.
Go split wood with that axe.
Let's
see what happens. You're not going to.
What happened? It got stuck in her and she's still alive.
Right.
I see her every day.
It's not designed to go through bone. And like a three blade style broadhead is designed to put a wound channel in something that won't close, but it's not designed to go through a shoulder. So if the shoulder is your number one worry, VPA single bevel broadhead is the smartest thing you can use.
That's what I'm using. I got the Omega and the S7, and I shot another deer a couple months later. Mm-hmm. Granted, this was actually a good shot. I didn't hit anything. It zipped straight through her. And that was when I was like, I'm sold.
So if you take a single bevel blade, it's typically going to penetrate about 20% better because there's about 20% less resistance on cut on a single bevel. Now, it's hard to quantify and prove in a lab, and Iron Will's tried a lot because he also believes it penetrates better, but it's hard to prove it in a lab environment because the tips get in the way of measuring and penetrating, because a tip on a double tends to have a little less resistance when it's first going into something, so they kind of offset. Yeah. But it's not what you see in reality, but it's what you see in a lab, unfortunately. But when you have two blades versus three blades, you're going to penetrate 20 to 30% more typically on a two blade than you will a three blade because there's one less cutting surface. Mm-hmm. Everything else equal, right? Cutting diameter, single bevel, etc. Everything else being measured equally, your two blade's going to go through 20 to 30% better than a three blade will, right? So if you're worried about penetration, a single blade two bevel broadhead is 95% of it. And then the other 5% is how much weight you choose to put behind it. Now, for 5%, do you want to let the animal move 20% farther before your arrow gets there?
No.
So the lightest thing you can put behind a whatever weight broadhead you want to use with adequate spine. I mean, what broadhead weight we're using there? Because if you're using a single bevel, you're probably 150, I would think.
125.
25. Okay, so let's say 125. If you're using that hard of an object and you want to get through the shoulder, your componentry in the insert cannot be aluminum.
Oh no, it's not. I think I know it's ethics. I want to say I can't remember if it's steel.
Probably steel.
Yeah.
Titanium's new for them this year. They just started making some, so it's probably steel, which means you probably have 100 grains of insert weight or somewhere in that.
Not even. I was well, okay, so let me backtrack. When I shot this doe and the arrow that I had set up where it didn't penetrate, I was shooting what was it? 52 grains up front in a half out with 100 grain point. I then switched to I was shooting rip TKOs. This is all before I got with Nimrod and everything. And those arrows I have now are, 63-ish grains without the broadhead up front and then 125. But when I was shooting the rip TKOs, it was a 50 grain half out and then 125 grain point.
So is it their stock half out?
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was whatever one comes with it. So
I love rip TKOs. I hate their components.
Really?
Hate them. Dude, they never leave the shop with that component.
Why do you not like them?
It's a big aluminum piece of 50 grains. Like it's gonna bend.
Oh, that's aluminum?
It's hard. Oh yeah, that whole collar system's aluminum. Even the one they make that has steel and aluminum, it's still got aluminum in it, no matter what. So aluminum is soft. Aluminum's not brass, but it's not far from it.
Yeah.
It gives really easily. So if you hit something hard, i.e. a shoulder, that's where it's going to fail.
Yeah.
Your it's probably still intact and it probably gave right at the insert system.
Dude,
if you had a 50 grain titanium insert in that same arrow, you're probably going through.
So to that point, the arrow that I'm talking about that it didn't penetrate and all that other stuff was a Black Eagle. And I'm not throwing them under the bus at all, but it was a Black Eagle Rampage that had their
steel.
Yeah, the steel 50
comes with a 52 grain steel insert.
That's what it was, yeah. And what's so crazy is, and I met a Darton rep that works with Black Eagle, and I asked him, I was like, hey, what, I'm just telling you that my experience. I shot these arrows over the summer last year, and I had 3 of them break off in foam. Didn't hit anything hard. They just broke right at where the half out's at. I ran them anyway, shot that deer, and either the arrow broke or her shoulder broke. And I'll tell you, I believe it's the arrow because she was walking around fine. Like a week later, she showed up. You could see where I hit her.
Sure.
And the arrow did stay in her. She ran off. I watched her. I thought I killed her. If I show you the photo, I'll send you the photo after this.
Yeah.
The placement looks perfect. But from what I remember in that shot, it was maybe an inch high. Had I have gone an inch low, it would have gone straight through. But it was an inch high, got embedded, and I swear that arrow broke.
You're probably not wrong. The problem with using like a 50 grain steel component like that is if it's really short, there's not a lot of give from where the point tries to bend, right?
True. Yeah.
So that's why I like my 50 grain titanium insert because it's that long. So you've got that much connection all the way down the arrow. So the arrow is going to always break if it's going to break at the tail end of the insert, right? It's where the bend is happening. So if you think of that broadhead and that insert as one unit,
yeah,
right, because they're rigid together.
Mm-hmm.
The end of where that unit is where it's going to try to flex. Even though there's this much arrow over it, right? It's still trying to flex here. So if that was down there in the arrow, it's quantifiably harder to break.
Yeah.
So having a long internal shank, which Ethics does a good job of that, they've got a good system in those, is really a big difference in there. The number one failing part of an arrow is almost always the insert.
Yeah. And that made me wonder.
The arrow, it's almost always the insert or what the insert caused the arrow to do.
I got you. But why would it? I just can't understand why it would break in foam. Like, I'm not shooting super hard targets. They're just regular Delta McKenzie.
It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either, but it could be a combination of possibilities. It could be It's not something I've gotten feedback from, and I sell Rampages and I sell a lot of them.
Yeah.
It's not feedback I've gotten, but maybe practicing and hitting the others over time caused it to snap off. Maybe you're hitting what foam was it, a 3D target or
Yeah.
okay, so there is conduit in 3D targets in several spots.
That's true.
So it's may not necessarily be foam that you hit. You might have hit the metal electrical conduit they use for the rebar in the leg that goes, depending on the 3D target. Some of them have it all the way up to damn near the vital core, and some of them have it in their back.
Gee, really?
Well, yeah, because it's foam. How are you going to hold a core in a foam target?
I
You got
just
to
figured
some
they made the mold and that was it.
No, no. There's a lot of the better 3D targets have metal in them somewhere.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Well,
you may have actually hit metal and not realized it just because it seemed like it was foam.
yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm not bashing them. I know Rampages are good arrows. I just had multiple failures, so I was like, dude, I wanted to try the Rip TKOs anyway, so I switched, and they were great. And I mean, honestly, the Nimrod arrows that I'm shooting now, if I had to shoot them side by side, they basically seem like the same thing. They seem very, very high level compared to other stuff. Because I was shooting blood sports, like Walmart blood sports a year ago. So I've really tried to upgrade a little bit. And I've actually bought one of your, because I didn't realize that it was like you buy them one piece at a time. I thought you got a 12 pack. But I bought one of your inserts and then one shows up. I was like, oh, dang. Okay. So I just threw it in one arrow. And I mean, it was great. It flew great, spun well. Everything was good on it. So I don't know, man. But you would agree that there is a happy medium probably for like the average size guy.
Yeah, I don't typically recommend people use what I use, to be honest, because one, you have to be better at tuning to get something going that fast to tune well, which you got to look at most of the information that's on the internet from, reputable sources are usually trying to give you a safe guideline, right? So if you're not getting help, like if that's where you're getting your resource information from, you're probably not getting a lot of help.
Yeah.
You're probably using that. So most of those guys will recommend very similar things because they're really user friendly.
Yeah.
Not be exactly what they use, although I know some of them do, but I've also known lots of reputable names that you would know that are using a lot lighter than you would think.
Yeah.
There's a
I
reason.
know one of them that's a buddy of mine shoots 409 grains with a mega meat. And I'm like, how are you getting pass throughs, dude? Like, you're no bigger than me. How? How are you doing that? And he does it. It's unreal. So I don't know. I get all my arrow info from you, T-Bone, and Troy. I kind of mix it all together. And that's pretty much what I've landed on is, 450-ish, maybe a little lighter, maybe a little heavier. Seems to be, at least for my setup, what flies the best. And I don't know, like
what I typically find is a guy when he finally settles on what he thinks is right, every year goes by, he gets a little lighter and a little lighter because it worked and everything seems to be good and I feel confident in it, but I want to tweak with something.
Yeah.
So I'm going to figure out how to be like 10 grains lighter and then try that. And then before you know it, you're shooting 420 or 410. And you eventually got it. As long as you're doing it and not losing arrow spine to do it.
Yeah.
There's not a downside. If you think about it, like the arrow, the energy that's in a bow transferred into an arrow is based off of its flex, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the arrow's flexing to its optimal point, it's transferring as much energy into it as possible. So how is a lighter arrow carrying less energy really? If they both are the same stiffness?
Not.
There's a reason when you do like kinetic energy tests and whatnot, there's almost no difference.
Yeah.
When you test it for speed, test it for weight, put it in a kinetic energy equation, there's like a half a pound of difference. And it's 80 pounds. So what percentage is that? Like what, 2%? Something tiny?
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is we don't need to be shooting rebar at these animals.
No. No, I mean if you want to shoot something through both shoulder blades or both sockets, yeah. 700, 800 grains, 300 grain, 3-to-1 cut ratio, single bevel two blade, go for it. But outside of that, if you're not deliberately trying to shoot the animal in the hardest part of its body, you don't need the weight at all.
I gotcha. Well, that's why I wanted to get you on to set it straight. I have one more question for you before we wrap this up. I know I've held you a little bit longer than I had told you. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
But you mentioned something earlier about arrow weight and FOC in flight and how it'll drop. So I had an experience last summer. I got some of those Easton 4mm match grades,
Yep.
Axis. And when I got that from them, they sent me the the aluminum outsert and the 92 grain. I think it's titanium, right? Titanium outsert that they have.
92 grain is not titanium, it's steel.
Okay.
Titanium, 52 grains.
Got it. Well, whatever it was, I put it all together. And I have the easy fletch like you guys. Y'all are the reason actually why I shoot such a heavy helical. If I showed you my new arrows, which I think I have one down here somewhere, it's got I'm running the AE hybrids, the keep hammering ones, and
Yep.
they are just super wavy. And I've had so many people be like, "Oh, it's gonna parachute, it's gonna do this." The only time I've ever noticed that was on those Eastons. It wasn't with that specific vein. It was with bully vein. But I had it was total arrow weight was 435 grams.
Mm-hmm.
At 40, perfectly fine. 40 and in, no issues. I went to the range one day with some buddies, shot out to 55, and I could literally watch the arrow go up and then fall out of the sky.
Mm-hmm.
Why?
If you get too much FOC or too much front weight, you'll start to see a significant drop the farther out you get.
Okay.
And if you shoot broadhead in a field point, you'll see the two separate even more because it's not flying perfectly level. It's starting at a nosedive.
Okay.
So that's part of why I settled on 15%.
Yeah.
So I tried everything from like 7% to 20%. And where I managed to shoot out at distance consistently was around that 15% ratio.
Gotcha. So it probably was just overloaded up front.
It's too much, probably too much weight in the front.
Gotcha. Well, I still have them. I'm probably giving them to a buddy of mine, and I told him not to put those for that reason because he's in Michigan and he's got a couple spots he could shoot far. And I was like, bro, you don't want to think that you're good and then completely miss and lose. I lost 3 arrows that day because of it. There's nothing I could do. So anyway, that's my experience with it. Look, man, I appreciate you coming on. I've learned a lot. My brain hurts. I feel like my eyes are cross-eyed right now with all the information that you put out. Why don't you do a shameless plug though? Why don't you let us know what's going on with Podium Archer? Are we going to see more of you on Elk Shape with Tim? Like, what's going on with all of that?
Let's see. Podium Archer's growing every day. We're expanding more products, more SKUs. Send requests to the website if there's products that we're not carrying that you want to see us carrying, because we do want to carry everything under the sun archery related, period. It might take a couple more years before we literally have everything you can think of, but that's the goal. I'll still continue to collaborate with Elk Shape. In fact, Dan just bought the house a quarter mile from me.
Oh, nice.
And it's moving. So he'll actually be closer. He was about 15, 20 minutes away. And I still will do the podcast with Tim once a week, and I'll be on his channel most videos that he makes. We usually try to get together once a week and make whatever video he wants to make, and I usually try to help. There'll be some that I'm not in just because the scheduling didn't work, or he went and did something and wants to use that week. But in general, I'll still help both of them. And I figure the more information and help I can get out there, the better. And the more likely you all are to learn and get better at this sport, the more likely you are to stay in the sport, the more likely you are to get other people in the sport. And then we grow as a community. And hopefully when it comes time to have legislation and voting that relates towards bow hunting, we have a better chance.
I love it because I know you guys are going through a lot of stuff up there right now with legislation. I just did a survey for our guys over here with the whole deer season. Dude, the comments that I saw, I wanted to comment on there so bad. I'm like, you guys are idiots. This is not, whatever you're saying on here is not going to work. Like, there were so many different things. And it's like, oh, make season, 1 week in December. And I'm like, that's not plausible here. There's too many deer. You'd have way too many people. You wouldn't kill anything. So awesome, man. Well, look, I appreciate it. Thank you for carving out the time. It was a year in the making, and I'm very thankful. Hopefully we can find some time to get you back on once I get my head straight about all this arrow and bow stuff.
You know how to get a hold of me. Just message me through Instagram, and I'll hit you back.
Sounds good, man. Well, I appreciate it, buddy.
Take care.